Hi again. In A.T. Robertson's The Divinity of Christ in the Gospel of John, we've reached chapter 6, The Clamor of the Multitude, Robertson's subtitle. The scene changes to the Sea of Galilee on a grassy slope on the northeastern side near Bethsaida, Julius, in the Tetrarchy of Philip. There is a great multitude who are carried away by the words and deeds of Jesus. The great Galilean ministry lies behind this day. The feeding of the 5,000 men, besides the women and children, was the climax. When therefore the people saw the sign which he did, they said, "This is of a truth the prophet that cometh into the world." This was a popular description of the Messiah. In Galilee, as we know, Jesus had been avoiding the term Messiah, and the Pharisees had tried to destroy his power with the people by saying that he was in league with Beelzebub. But here the people renounce the Pharisaic tutelage and, in ecstasy of enthusiasm, propose to seize Jesus in order to make him king, whether or no. They are just at the point of starting this enterprise when Jesus perceives it in time to nip it in the bud. It is a crisis and calls for instant action on the part of Jesus. These people have the notion of a political Messiah, which the Pharisees had taught them, which even the disciples held in spite of Christ's teachings till the Spirit came. They planned a political coup, so to speak, and were going to take Jesus to Jerusalem and proclaim him king in opposition to Caesar, and so throw off the hated Roman yoke. It had come to this, that the Galileans would welcome Jesus as Messiah in defiance of the Pharisees if Jesus would be their sort of a Messiah. In truth, the Pharisees themselves would have hailed him as Messiah on the same terms. It was the voice of the people, but, alas, not the voice of God. John does not tell about the sending of the multitude away, but only of the withdrawal of Jesus, again, into the mountains by himself alone, according to John 6:15. He was absolutely alone in the world so far as human understanding went, for the 12 themselves evidently sympathized with the mad purpose of the crowd to make Jesus a political king in Jerusalem. This section is entitled "The Fear of the Disciples." Delayed by the sudden storm on the lake and the thick darkness, the disciples about the fourth watch, 3 o'clock at night, see what looks like a ghost walking on the sea and drawing nigh unto the boat. They become afraid, and naturally so. They were willing to take Jesus into the boat only after his reassuring voice. John touches this miracle lightly, but it is clear that the disciples gained a fresh impression of the power of Jesus over wind and wave, as they had just seen his mastery in the matter of the loaves and the fishes. This section is entitled "The Sifting of the People." In the synagogue in Capernaum on the morrow, Jesus faces a great crowd, including the people who the day before showed such fanaticism because of the loaves and the fishes. The populace are fickle, and even now seem to be hinting for a fresh meal at the hands of Jesus. There is not here space to follow in detail the steps by which Jesus almost cast pearls before swine in his patient endeavor to help these people see what sort of a Messiah he really is, in contrast to their political hopes expressed the afternoon before. When he seeks to turn their thoughts to the food for eternal life and belief on him as sent of God, they actually demand a new sign for such faith, something on a par with the manna in the wilderness, which came every morning, not only one meal on an afternoon. When Jesus offers them better bread than that, they eagerly cry for it, thinking only of literal bread. But when he explains that he is himself the bread of life and the water of life, they murmur like a swarm of bees with skeptical scorn at his divine claims. This Jesus, whose father and mother we know, they say in verse 41. Here we see the popular incredulity of the possibility of the combination in one person of God and man. Modern unbelief illustrates precisely the same attitude of mind. But Jesus explains the folly of their scorn and their impotence to come to him for life without the drawing of the Father. That's verse 44. they are not taught of God. So Jesus repeats his claim to be the bread of life in his own flesh, which he is giving for the life of the world. The Jews were indignant at this presentation of the matter and actually came to blows, a sort of riot with each other at the idea of eating his flesh as if they were cannibals. When Jesus further explained that they must eat his flesh and drink his blood, it was plain that he was far beyond the depth of these people without mystical insight. It is not necessary to see here a forecast of the Lord's Supper, but simply a mystical and bold statement of the necessity of the spiritual appropriation of the life and death of Christ. He even says, "Catch me," or "eat of me," rather. It is evident that Jesus is testing this crowd to the bottom to see how they will rally to a spiritual Messiah. It was only too clear what they would do by what they did. Many of the professed disciples now followed the other Jews in disgust out of the synagogue. They walked no more with Jesus. If this is all that he meant to do, they had had enough of him and of his message. Now at last they had their eyes opened. All had gone save the 12. Jesus turned to them and asked, "Would ye also go away?" The form of the question expects a negative answer, but the mere asking of it shows how much Jesus took to heart this rejection by the populace whom he longed to save. Perhaps the 12 had also been disenchanted like the rest. They now have their opportunity if they wish to leave Jesus. It is Peter who speaks, as usual, and his answer shows clearly that they had faced that alternative and decided against it. "Lord, to whom shall we go?" That is one point. "Thou hast the words of eternal life." That is another. But best of all is this, "And we have believed and know that thou art the Holy One of God." This is not a new discovery on their part. They had seen that at the start, but it is now their settled conviction after all their doubts and fears, and they gladly reaffirm their faith at this moment when the floating crowd have renounced their allegiance to Jesus, who is no longer the Galilean hero. It is plain, therefore, that the hope of Jesus lies in this little band of faithful men. But there is bitterness at the bottom of this cup of joy, for one of these men of Christ's choice is a devil. Judas, one of the 12, was to betray Jesus. This Jesus knew, though he did not explain the terrible accusation. A sudden look of dismay was probably shot at each other when Jesus says, "One of you." Next, chapter 7, the ridicule of Christ's brethren. See you next time.